What is the most heartbreaking confession you've heard from a family member? My adopted brother feels as though the family doesn't love him. My parents have 5 kids, including my adopted brother, John. John was adopted when his biological parents, who were close friends with our parents, died when he was a few months old. I remember growing up with John normally as any siblings would, and all of our other siblings say the same. We played, we fought, we made up, and we broke our parents' crap. However, the past 5 years have been somewhat strange. At first we thought it was just John being John, but now after I've spoken with him, we discovered it was more than we thought. First off, John left the day he turned 18, which was a surprise because he had good grades and everyone assumed he'd go to college like the rest of us. He graduated from high school 1 semester early and left the house on his 18th birthday. He had earned money doing chore work for our dad and uncles, had bought his own car, and apparently saved enough to get an apartment. It was weird and my parents were sad, but more than that they were proud and happy for him. Dad offered John money to help him start out life on his own, but John refused and said he'd be fine. My parents were insanely proud of John. They're not typically the brag on my kid kind of people, but they were telling everyone how independent, responsible, mature and fearless John was. Now it's important to note that us siblings were always fairly close. I cried the first night John was gone. I wanted my dad to figure out a way to make him come back because I was scared he would die or something. So when the communication was suddenly almost nothing, it was weird and we missed him. Our parents would just say that he was busy working and taking care of himself, and that when he'd settled and figured things out, he'd be back to his normal self. It never happened though, and he also stopped really talking to them. He'd talk to us around birthdays and holidays, but even then it was strange. He would try to meet up with siblings for dinner or drinks on birthdays, always visits our parents very quickly on their birthdays and Mother's or Father's Day, and on Thanksgiving and Christmas, he is in and out. For example, our older brother was the only one there when John was there for our mom's most recent birthday. He said John was very clinical and that it felt more like a soldier was paying respect to a commanding officer than anyone visiting their parents. One thing about this that stood out was that John talked to our mom, dad and brother about a lot going on in his life. Apparently he'd gotten a girlfriend, just got a dog, and has a great new job in construction. No one knew any of this, and Dad cracked a joke about how they were terrible parents because how could they not know anything about what was going on in one of their kids' lives. After John left, our mom looked sad. When our older brother asked her what was wrong, she said that it felt like John didn't want to be around her and that she missed him. So our older brother started a group chat with everyone but John to ask if any of us had noticed anything wrong with him. We'd all talked about how distant he'd been over the years, but never like this. At the end of it, we all arranged to meet up with John and try to talk to him to make sure everything was okay. It took some effort to get him to open up, but he finally did. What he said really rocked our family. He said, "I'm not their real son." We all immediately tried to reassure him that Mom and Dad love him and we do too. But then he had all these stories about how Mom and Dad treated him differently. Things like how our older brother would hug or kiss Mom on the cheek, but she'd push John off if he tried the same. Dad would happily talk sports with anyone, but would be short with John. Our grandparents were never excited to see him, and aunts and uncles were not interested in him or his hobbies or what was going on at school. There was also one incident where Dad asked each boy to go on a hunting trip. He never asked John until they were leaving, and when he did finally ask, you could tell Dad was annoyed.
To be honest, in my head, I was gaslighting myself and worrying that I had somehow saved the card in Google and maybe my wife had been accidentally using it or something. It was terrible, and I found myself apologizing and saying I don't know how this happened. I assure you that I know that none of those expenses are appropriate uses of company funds. There must have been some kind of mistake. Can I please have the details and look into it? When I finally got out of that office, Evie was waiting for me at my office door. She was grinning from ear to ear and sweetly explained she had been waiting for our morning meeting. I told her something had come up and we'd do the meeting tomorrow, and she said, "Oh, will you be in tomorrow?" Confused, I just replied, "Yes, why would I not be here tomorrow?" And she just sipped her tea and said, "Oh, no reason," turned around and went back to her desk. Something felt off, but I was still worrying about what had happened with the boss, so I spent the next couple of hours calling my wife, calling Adobe, and all the other companies that the card spent money on. It became very obvious that someone had been using my name and the company card to spend a bunch of money online. Had I been hacked or something? Personal info on the dark web, and these hackers just really wanted Photoshop and McDonald's delivered? It was the Uber Eats that was her undoing. After getting on the phone and talking through what had gone on, and obviously giving my name for the account and everything, the fellow on the phone told me where the food had been delivered. It was in our city, which made me rule out straight away any notion of my data being sold online or something. Now I was suspicious and angry. Listening to my gut, I pulled up Evie's employee information and checked her address. I pulled it up on Google Maps, dropped a pin on her place, and then looked for the address Uber Eats had given me. It was the corner of her block. I was furious. When she left work for the day, I got IT to give me access to her laptop. Sure enough, when I opened up her account, there it was. The fake email account that I had been framed with. To be fair to her, there were some things she had been smart about. The IP address she had been using was the office, which would have tied back to me. She had even had the food delivered to a different address. She had even made a fake email address. But saving her passwords on a work computer was a mistake. I called the boss that night and explained what I had found, and kept the IT guy with me to support the fact that I hadn't just logged into her computer and made it all up. The next day the boss called her into the office and fired her. When she left his office sobbing, I made sure I was standing in the hall. I asked, "Oh, will you be in tomorrow?" She gave me the meanest look ever and then angrily stormed off. I hope she received the nice goodbye McDonald's delivered by Uber Eats I got her. Paid for on my personal card, of course.